Hello and welcome to episode 41 of the Best Games Period. We made it, fellas. We finally are recording our 41st episode almost a year after we launched our new podcast.
So shouldn't we be on like 52?
Well, we've done like our little mini honorable mention episodes, and
Indeed.
I think a few other extra things here and there throughout the past year. So we're a little bit behind in the numbers, but
Well, if you count all that, I think there's only a couple of weeks we didn't post a show.
Only 1 week we
Only
haven't
1
posted
week.
a show. Yeah.
Well, good job to somebody.
Good job to all of us. It was a team effort. But this week, with me, Jack Gardner, as always, are Daniel Jones and Jeremy Brown. Say hello, fellas.
Hello, fellas.
Sup, dog?
And this week is a very special episode. We're talking about That Game Company's Flower. And it's even more special than usual beyond just being our 41st episode, because we actually already spent like an hour and a half talking about Flower last week, but due to technical shenanigans, that episode is lost to the mists of time. So we're going to be talking about it again, so you can actually hear about it. And it might be a little bit awkward for us, just because it's really hard recording about something you've already recorded about. Sometimes you feel like you're just being redundant, and you're not sure if that's because you've already talked about it on this episode or on the episode no one will ever listen to. So
Yeah, but we've managed to talk about like Mass Effect and Skyrim dozens of times throughout different episodes, and so we can handle it.
true, but each of those times were very interesting, and everyone cared about it.
That's true.
So, but yeah, this week we're talking about That Game Company's Flower. We're gonna hop right into it. Who wants to take a crack at it? What is Flower?
It's a type of plant that, or, I mean, depending on how you spell it, it's a baking ingredient. Typically used in anything that you need, any kind of pastries, cupcakes, cake, muffins.
Man, you're really on the whole cake and
Pancakes.
cupcake thing, aren't you? You can make other things with flour.
This is going disastrously, I just want to say.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Or it's a type of plant. It's a plant that
Please
that
move
grows
on.
and blossoms.
Oh my gosh.
Is wheat not
there
also
are
a plant?
thousands, if not millions, of variations of flowers, and some are very rare. There's a whole movie called Adaptation, which is a really good movie about people looking for a rare orchid, I mean, that's what flowers are. Yeah.
Daniel, delete your account.
Daniel, you really committed to that bit. I'm proud of you. Not your best
Thank you.
work, but I'm proud of you for the commitment.
Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate your patronization.
You're welcome.
So, do you want to do it for real?
Yeah. What really is flower?
The video game.
Flower is the second game by a company called That Game Company. Their first game was a game called Flow. And I don't know if it was intentional, but maybe that their next game was just Flow with an ER on the end. But it was a very different game than Flow. But both games are kind of chill, relaxing games. Flower was three-dimensional. Flow was not. Flower is a game where you play as the wind, and you pick up flower petals as you go along through fields full of flowers and tall waving grass. And it's a very pretty game. It's a very surreal game.
Serene?
I don't know. Serene, even better. Thank you, Jack. That was the word that was on the tip of my tongue. So it's a very serene game where you just float around in the fields as the wind, and you pick up these flowers, and you have a few different objectives as you go along, but nothing, you're not picking up side quests here and there. You're just just going from place to place as the wind, and as you pick up flowers, you make the fields much more colorful and vibrant, and that's the basic gist of what Flower is. There's no enemies or bosses. Just a chill, relaxing game where you play as the wind.
And I think it is important that you are pointing out and emphasizing that you play as the wind, because I think there are people out there who think that you play as the actual flower petal, like you're a magical, sentient flower petal that is gathering up other flower petals, and it's not really what's going on in the game. Like,
right.
The flower petals are not characters. Although I suppose there's kind of a framing device for the gameplay, which is each level is related to a flower that's growing in a pot on a windowsill in a city. And you select a level by going to each flower, and you kind of it's described as kind of going into the flower's dream. So each level is kind of a flower's dream, but you're not playing as the flower. If that makes sense. It's a very it's hard talking about Flower because it's not a traditional game at all. In fact, I remember, this might have been a couple years ago now on our old show, but I remember we had a discussion about how games might be a disservice to games to actually call them games. Because Flower isn't really, I wouldn't describe it necessarily as a game, even though it kind of functions as one. It's more like an interactive art piece. It's an artistic experience, I guess. And we put forward a bunch of different names in that discussion about like what we should call games. Like, are they just interactive experiences? What are they? And I think Flower is a good example of one of the first big budget, and by big budget I mean by indie game standards, versions of things that don't really feel like they're encapsulated by the term video game.
Yeah.
I remember that episode. Seems we disagreed a bit, if I recall.
I think we might have been talking about Gone Home, actually.
Yeah. We didn't disagree about our fondness or not of Gone Home at the time, but
no.
Yeah. I mean, it's still an interesting discussion, but I think just like art, it's in the eye of the beholder or whatever the creator wants it to be, so I consider it a video game.
Well, that's interesting because I think that Genova Chen, who's kind of the main visionary behind that game company, said in a number of interviews that that he and his team were approaching it more like an art piece than a traditional game. So it's kind of it exists in a weird space where it has to be marketed as a game, it has to be perceived as a game in order to have financial success, but it's not really something most people would associate with a game. I remember I had it on, and my brother was over one time with his kids, and he kind of looked at it out of the corner of his eye and was like, "What is this? This doesn't like," because I had just left it playing, and it's not a game you can really lose. Yeah. So it was just the wind blowing around some petals, and the camera was kind of
more like a screensaver at that point.
Yeah, and he didn't quite get it.
Are screensavers even a thing anymore?
Sure.
Are they?
Yeah, I have a screensaver.
Do you?
It's a bunch of different game artwork and stuff.
Cool.
I don't know if they still serve the same purpose.
Same purpose, yeah. I guess that's more what I meant. I don't think
know
they're
if monitors
necessary now.
Yeah, monitors probably have the necessary technology not to burn out.
Yeah.
Which, hey, I feel like that should have been technology we had a long time ago before screensavers, but whatever.
But here we are.
Here we are, modern age, where we walk around with phones in our pockets that can burst into flames at any moment.
So we haven't mentioned that Flower was released first on the PlayStation 3 in 2009, and later came out on the Vita and PlayStation 4, I think in 2013,
Yep.
I think. So I played it on the PlayStation 4. Daniel, did you play it on the Vita or the PlayStation 3?
I mean, I eventually played it on the Vita, but the first time I played it was on PS3.
Okay. What about you, Jack?
I played it. I played it after I played Journey, actually. So
Interesting.
yeah, I got it on the PlayStation 4 when they re-released it for that. I think that was I think you were right on that, 2013. But yeah, I had played Journey and I had never played Flower, and I was just like, well, I'll give it a shot. You know, that game company has earned the benefit of the doubt with Journey. I think they have a lot of they have a lot of cachet now. Like I'm interested to see what they do next, because they can do a lot after Journey's success.
Well, according to Daniel, it would probably be Journeyer.
Yes, that's it. Yep, Journeyer. Yep,
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah,
Yep.
that'd be cool.
That's it.
Yeah, I didn't play
Somebody
it
ever need to do.
until recently on the PlayStation 4 myself. I guess I should have been aware because I played Flow, but it's all motion control based.
Yeah, that is interesting, because I think it's one of the few motion control games that genuinely works with motion control.
Yeah.
Like, that seems to be really hit or miss.
Do you think it's because the concept is simple enough and it doesn't have to do a whole lot, or does that game company just have a good handle on the motion controls?
You know, I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Because there are other games that use similar motion control schemes. Last time we talked about this on our last attempt to do episode 41, you brought up the game Lair. Lair also has basic motion controls, which is how you control this dragon, which sounds awesome, but in practice it controls really not great.
No, it was terrible. That was a PlayStation 3 launch game, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah. But Flower is one of the few games that actually got that right. It feels really awesome to just kind of flow around as the wind, and it feels natural and controls pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's definitely due to the fact that it's so simple, like you said. Like, Layer doesn't work because there's too much to do. You know, it's too complicated, and like there's too much to manage, and the motion controls can't keep up. But in Flower, it's just simple.
And you played it on the PlayStation 3?
Yes.
Do you think it has anything to do with the controller technology itself? Like,
I mean, maybe, but I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, Layer was also on the PS3.
Well, yeah, but I was wondering if your experience might be a little bit different than ours, because we both played it on the PlayStation 4, and maybe the PS4 controller is a little bit better. I don't know.
I will say this. I think that two things. I enjoyed it more when I played it on Vita and didn't use motion controls, because you can turn them off on the Vita version. I think you can turn them off in all versions, but for some reason I feel like they came defaulted off on the Vita, but I could be wrong. But also the second thing is it's important that you play as the wind, because the wind is sort of a wide base. Like, when you go over a flower, you don't have to be completely precise. There are times where you miss, and that's a little frustrating. But you don't have to be perfectly accurate. You just go near the flower, and it blows the petal up, and you did it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you did have to be more precise than I think you should have been.
I mean, I get it, but that was kind of the main game element of it, so I get maybe they made it a little bit more difficult to appeal to people who need that sense of difficulty, that, if that makes sense. Because some people can't get involved in a game unless it challenges them a little bit.
The first, I think it's the third level, the first one that has windmills. It's actually pretty hard to get all the extra flowers, the secret flowers. That's because once you start going down that gully or gulch or whatever it would be considered, it's pretty hard to stop.
Oh yeah, because once you're going really fast.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and some people maybe who haven't played it or haven't been paying attention and haven't heard about it might be wondering why we're talking about it, because it might not necessarily seem like one of the best games, period. Just from listening to us talk about it, it's a pretty simple game. It's not very complex. But at the time when it came out in 2009, people went nuts over Flower. It won some Game of the Year awards. It was nominated for a number of different awards, including Outstanding Innovation in Gaming, Outstanding Achievement in Sound Design, Outstanding Achievement in Original Music Composition, and Outstanding Innovation in Game Direction. Those are all from the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, so that's pretty prestigious. And not only that, but it actually won BAFTA awards as well. So it won an Artistic Achievement Award from the British Academy of Film and Television Arts, which that's a pretty big deal.
I mean, that was around the time when video games started to win BAFTAs.
It also won the 2009 Spike Video Game Awards for what was the full title, Jack? It says Casual Game of the Year in what I'm looking at, but Powered by Dew or something like that.
It won Best Independent Game Fueled by Dew. Obviously the most prestigious award of all.
Yes.
Oh, of course. Dew wouldn't settle for anything less.
No. Of course not. Dew only settles on the most pristine of flowers. People really thought this was something new and exciting and pushing games in a new direction, and that view has kind of stuck with it over time. Maybe it's diminished a little bit, if I'm reading kind of the industry as a whole correctly, but I mean, even just a couple years ago, it was featured in the 100 Greatest Games of All Time list by Time, the magazine.
Yep.
And it's been highlighted in other similar lists as well. So what exactly made people go insane over this? Like, where are we doing justice to it so far in the discussion, I guess is what I'm getting at.
It's really a hard game, in my opinion, to do justice to in a discussion, because it is pretty simplistic and there's not a lot there without a personal interpretation by each individual player to really, I mean, there's nothing set in stone. Like, you can't say this means this or that means that, which is true for many things, obviously, but, you know, there's no dialogue at all. There's no real story that is, you know, laid out plain for you to understand. I mean, you can kind of gather the underlying idea behind the game, I suppose. I think most people come to a general consensus on that. But yeah, it's pretty hard to define and say a lot of great or negative things about. I think it's a game people just have to experience for themselves and kind of draw their own conclusions without expecting it to be some, you know, something. I don't know how to say this without making it sound like a criticism, without it being something more than it is, which is just a pretty cool little indie game that takes maybe an hour and a half to finish, and there's not a lot to it, but what there is done very well. And, you know, it is kind of an emotional journey, I suppose, for most people that played it. And that might be why it caught on so well when it came out in 2009. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think you're right. So they're the main purpose of Flower, according to Genova Chen, is to invite people into kind of a calm, serene mindset. So, what they did is when they play tested it, they kept taking away any elements that might detract from that emotional headspace they wanted to foster in players. And for what it's worth, I think they 100% succeeded in that. It's really a calming experience to play Flower. When you sit down and play it, the music is pretty much perfect for what they're trying to do. The control scheme isn't very frustrating. In fact, it's very intuitive with the motion controls. And as Daniel pointed out, you can even play it without motion controls if that's not really your bag. Some players complained early on that it was too heavy with its environmentalist message, which, I mean, it's a game about flowers, so that's pretty much unavoidable, right? That players would get an environmentalist message out of a game like that. But I
feel like it was supposed to. You know, like, wasn't that kind of the point of the game?
But I think their main point was the calming mindset, and if you have people who are like, well, this is really taking me out of the experience, they kind of toned that back a bit.
Sure.
But, I mean, it's a game where you play as flowers, and part of the scenery is kind of not that great-looking city, and there's kind of a message about industrialization in that. And I'm sure you could read into it and maybe write a pretty neat think piece about it, but it's not that big of a deal. Like, the core part of the game is not environmentalism and how, you know, cities are bad or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it was a subtle underlying... No. Not subtle, I think it was pretty obvious myself, but it was more of an underlying message, and it wasn't, one of those, you're an evil person just for playing this game because you're consuming power for doing so type of messages. It was just like, hey, man, relax, think about your own actions and what you can do as an individual, and just go with the flow.
Yeah.
Try to make things, I guess that's the message I got out of it from an environmental standpoint.
Just try and leave things a little bit better than how you found them.
I didn't feel like firebombing the local oil refinery after I played it or anything like that.
How incredible would that be as a finale to Flower? The flowers rise up. That would be amazing. But yeah, I admire it. I admire that game company for Flower, if for no other reason than I think it continues that trend that we saw started in Ico of minimalist game design and just stripping away everything that doesn't serve your core message, your core idea of what the game is. And I think it does that very well. And whether or not the content of the game or the mindset of the game really speaks to you, I think, I don't know, I think in 2009 things were a lot different than they are in 2016, and so maybe it just hit at the right time. Like, I don't know, what do you think, Daniel?
No, I think people were just less accustomed to games saying things, like they were less accustomed to games actually having a point to make. And I think, the anecdote that I read in research is that they had people testing the game, and people basically said that they didn't like that it was trying to tell them something. They didn't like the environmental message. I don't necessarily know that it was the message itself that they didn't like, or the fact that the game was doing it. We don't know, in what ways the game was trying to tell its story and get its moral across. But I think even after the game released, I think some people were a little bit thrown off by it, and I just think that's growing pains. I think that's just the industry and people who play games getting used to games having more to say than just save the world, save the princess, shoot lots of people.
And I also would tend to think that the people, not all of them obviously, but the ones that were upset about the environmental message were probably the same people that were, screaming filthy casual in an unironic way all the time in 2009. Casual games were seen as this enemy of the gaming industry by a lot of people, that just didn't fit in. Jack, you asked earlier why this caught on, and I gave kind of a reason for that. But I think another reason is that it was so accessible. A lot of people, maybe their spouse or kids had a PlayStation 3, and they didn't do well with most of the games. But this one was fairly inexpensive, and it was simple to pick up and play. And I think it just made gaming more accessible for a lot of people. And we've seen that with, mobile gaming and lots of other things where there was some pushback from a lot of people on that stuff. And now I think it's just it's okay, where most of us are used to it. And but Flower in particular, I think really helped open that up on consoles.
I think it's kind of interesting. You bring up casual and casual gaming, and I think at least part of the pushback comes, and I think to some degree still comes from these people who find it really hard to reconcile the fact that a game that can be played casually can also be treated seriously.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, in their mind, a casual game is only Candy Crush. And if you're treating something that's as easy and accessible as Candy Crush and looking at it critically and like taking its message seriously, or even if it has a message and it's accessible, well, those are two conflicting things that cannot coexist together for a lot of people. Which I find that kind of interesting. And also, just bringing it back to 2009, I think, and I have just kind of like this theory that the mid to late aughts of the 2000s can be summarized just in a broad sense by the tagline of the TV show Heroes. Which
save the cheerleaders, save the world.
Yeah, I think that perfectly sums up where a lot of people were just in terms of like storytelling in from 2006 to 2009 or even 2010. And I think that period of time when Heroes was on TV, I'm making a big leap here, but I think that period of time when Heroes was on TV and popular, that's kind of how people thought about video games. Like, well, you save the girl and then you save the world. Like that's how video game stories work. Like those are the most popular and well-known video game stories. You got Legend of Zelda, you got your Mario, and those are the two most widely recognized video game franchises.
And Heroes was such a shit show.
I never watched it.
I hated that show. I really wanted to like that show, but it sucked.
But back in the day, people thought it was great.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just think it was a time, like you said, of growing pains. So like people got really attached to what they thought games needed to be and should be. And so part of the pushback against something like Flower, which you look back at Flower today and it's like, oh, that's a really innocuous, kind of ephemeral experience. But when it came out in 2009, it was really, really different and really, really not something that typically came out even on PC, let alone on console.
Yeah, I agree.
And PCs were still kind of the Wild West of indie games.
The Red Dead Redemption 2 of indie games. Wait, what?
Speaking of Red Dead Redemption, do you think that they are going to be announcing a sequel to Red Dead Redemption or a remake of Red Dead Redemption?
Sequel.
Clothing
You think
line.
so?
Yeah, no, I think it's Red Dead Redemption too.
Okay.
Sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted the show to say that. Just had to
There's
get that in there.
somebody posted something I saw that had like the source code for that teaser, and it said something. I don't know. This could completely just be something somebody made up. But
Yeah. You can,
if it's not,
you can
it's a cool.
go in and type other things in there.
Yeah,
but-
exactly.
Yeah.
It said Red Dead Retribution, which actually would really make sense. Would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
cool.
I mean, I hope that's what it is, sincerely, but I guess
I'd
we'll
also be
find out
okay with a
eventually.
remaster of Red Dead Redemption,
Yeah, so would I.
which we've talked about on this show, and you should totally go listen to it.
Definitely.
That's the best games period right there.
Yeah,
I think it was episode 17.
So then I have a question. Since you've both played Journey, correct?
Well, I haven't
Jeremy?
finished it. I didn't put down my phone long enough. I didn't take your advice.
Are you ever
Yes.
like if you actually did play Journey, would you ever admit it to Daniel?
Yeah, of course I would.
At this point.
On his deathbed.
I think he knows that he has to.
Yeah.
But in the shadow of Journey, after, in a post-Journey world, like, how does Flower hold up? Is it still as good as it once was? Like, has it aged poorly now in comparison? This is something that I've always thought about.
Who are you asking?
I mean, asking both of you, since you both played it after Journey came out.
I think Flower still holds up well, and I don't think Journey has a lot to do with that one way or the other. Personally, I think they're just two different games, and I think just because they happen to be made by the same company doesn't mean they should be directly compared, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are things you can compare about them, though. Like, they do have similar kind of artistic designs. They have some. It has that game company feel, which
Sure.
is kind of hard to pin down, but
Yep.
it's a very polished, very highly polished experiences, both of them. But like Jeremy said, Daniel, I think both of them are going for completely different things. So it's really hard to directly compare them on a 1-to-1 basis, because Journey is entirely about the journey. So it plays across a whole spectrum of emotions.
But I
whereas
guess
Flower is dedicated to just one thing.
What I mean is that I think sometimes what they both do is very similar.
How so?
Well, they're very...
The wind blows the scarves
Kind of.
in Journey.
Whoa!
very-
Crossover! That's going to be their next game! Blowing scarves.
Magic Carpet Ride.
And it's going to be asymmetric multiplayer with people who are playing Journey. Oh my gosh!
Wow, that's better than the nacho flower concept we came up with last time on the show that will never be posted.
I don't remember Nacho Flower.
I don't remember that either.
Really? Remember?
Do you just
Nope.
do you just make up conversations?
No, it
we
was
have
after
in past shows?
you mentioned that the Spike Video Game Award was powered by Doom.
Yeah.
I was like, there should be a mod or something where instead of a flower petal, you play as nachos and you just go around till you get a whole bag of nachos.
Yes.
Not nachos,
Doritos,
Doritos.
right?
Doritos.
Doritos. I want
That's-
someone to mod that game to make it fit with the Spike Video Game Awards.
Too bad Sony's got mods locked down on PS4.
Oh,
But anyway.
they put them back into they're opening up back
I know.
to Fallout 4.
Yeah. Well, yes, but technically they have to use anything that's already in the game, any asset that's already in the game. They can't use anything outside of it. So no Doritos on PS4 for Jack. Sorry, Jack.
Oh, womp womp.
But I don't know. I think Flower is a very serene experience where it is a very relaxing, chill game, and Journey is very much the same kind of thing. And it's not that they're exactly the same, but they're going for some of the same emotions. And I just feel like Journey does all of that so much better.
I disagree that they're going for the same thing. They're totally not. Like, the Journey is... The entire thing about Journey is that it's going for different emotions, and it's not necessarily even a laid-back experience. Like, there are moments where it gets really tense and dark
True.
and sad and even maybe angry or frustrated. And I think it does a slight disservice to Flower to say that, well, it's not doing those things, so it's a lesser game. I just think it's going for something that's completely different. Like, that, the way I think of Flower is that it's going for that same feeling like you'd imagine a advanced Buddhist monk would have, just kind of meditating in a waterfall. Like, that's the kind of feeling I think Journey is going for.
Do they do that?
In movies. Maybe they do it in real life. I don't know.
You have to make it to top tier level monk to be able to do that.
Got to get some epic raid gear.
The god tier level monk. I don't know. I'm not trying to diss Flower. I love Flower. Some of my best friends are Flowers. But screwed that one up. But I don't know. I go back to Flower now after playing. I play Journey probably twice a year, at least. And I've played through it probably, I don't know, 30, 40 times in my life. Just since 2013 or 12. And Flower I play every once in a while, and I'll just pick it up and play a level here or there, and it's fine. And I appreciate the simplicity, but it just feels a little bit slight in comparison, and it's not a game that I get nearly as much out of. You're right. I don't think it was going for the same things as Journey. I think you're right. I was wrong on that. But it's, just Flower to me is the video game version of one of those CDs that you find at a store that's like a relaxation meditation CD that you put your headphones on and you listen for like 5 minutes in the middle of a store, and then you're like, okay, I never need to listen to that again. Or you might hear it like when you go to get a massage or something. Yeah. But you're not going to be...
Well...
I don't know. And I guess that has a place.
Yeah,
but...
counterpoint is that you say, well, you listen to that and you never listen to it again. But when the first one of those came out, people went nuts over it. Like, people went crazy over VHS how-to tapes in the 90s. And I think Flower is... This analogy is really not flattering to Flower. But I think there's something to be said if you're one of the first games that does that really well, to the point where you're receiving recognition all over the place for it in a medium that hasn't typically had that exist before.
Well, I think that's the important point that you're making, is that to that point, video games had been like 90% heavy metal, and then all of a sudden this like Yanni
listening.
album comes out, and it's like, oh my god, this is incredible, because it just was not like anything else going. So yeah, you're right. That's an important point.
Well, good. I'm glad I'm right.
Yeah, sure.
So I guess the general feeling I'm getting is that we're all kind of conflicted on this game. Where do we all feel like this lands? Is it a best game period? Is it just a great game that isn't really a necessary, like, everyone doesn't have to play this? Like, what Where does it fall for you guys?
Yeah, to me it's not, I don't think I would classify it to best games period. But I think it's a cool game. I think it's a neat game. I said on the recording that never got posted that I think it's, something I could see being used as a curriculum in like a high school art class or being used by therapists just for whatever reason. So I do think it has that very clear calming effect to it for most people. I can't imagine too many people played Flower and then went out and kicked their dog right afterwards, At least I hope not. Not that other games make you do that, but hopefully people get my point. But I don't think it's absolutely necessary that everybody plays this game. And if you're going to play any game, if you could only play one game from that game company, certainly it would be Journey up to this point. But the thing is, you can play both. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, everybody's experience with Flower is going to be a little bit different. It's probably different each time you play it. Like, I'm sure, Daniel, your experiences with Journey were a little bit different each time you played it. And I think that's what it's going for, and I think it does that well. But ultimately, no, I wouldn't classify it as a best games period.
Why does it fall short for you?
I hate to say this, but I don't think there's quite enough there to really justify telling everybody that listens to us, yes, this is a game that I absolutely think you have to play. And I'm not usually one that cares about length or the context or whatever's in a game. But in this case, I just, I think a lot of people could just play through it and be like, like Daniel said, that was neat, I never need to do that again. And others would be, overjoyed by it. And I think it's hard to determine which case would be for any individual. So I just don't think that, I guess that's where I think it falls short, if that makes any sense at all, which it probably doesn't.
Okay.
It totally makes sense, because that's kind of exactly what I would say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's a no. It's a no for you too.
Yeah, it's a no for me too.
And
I love that game, but it's just not quite on that level for me.
And for the same reasons that Jeremy just said.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's interesting to me that you're both saying that there's not a whole lot there, because on the one hand, I get what you're saying. It's a very short game. It does one thing, but it does very well. But at the same time, we've also talked about other really, really short games on this podcast. We've talked about Passage, for example, which is it's a 5-minute long indie game that's free. You should check it out. Check out our episode on that. But we've also talked about Tetris, which is arguably another short game.
Tetris takes forever to finish.
And that, well, if you're
I guess if you suck like I do, it takes forever to finish.
All right.
Well, I mean, if you're good at it, it takes a while. If you're bad at it, you just lose right away.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you look at it.
But it's weird to me that we talk about there not being enough there. But I think you guys are right. Like, it's very good at that one thing. It's playing a very, very nice note. But when you only have that one note, it's not as interesting. And maybe I guess the context of that note matters a whole lot more. So I'm kind of rambling, but if, again, we're comparing it to Journey, which isn't really fair, but I'm going to do it anyway. When you play Journey, it takes you through a whole range of emotions. It takes you on a literal journey and, a mental journey and an emotional journey. And in order to do that, it plays on a whole bunch of emotions. It hits a whole bunch of different notes as you're playing. It's like a song. It's like a symphony. And you compare that to Flower, and Flower is just one note. And when something's one note, it begins to matter a whole lot where it's hitting you in context. So if you're in a place where you could really benefit from a really calming experience, then you're going to love Journey. Like, because that note that is played really, really well fits in your life very, very well. And if you're in a place where you don't really need to spend a couple hours in a really soothing, calming environment that's just kind of pleasant, then you're not really going to get a whole lot out of Flower. And it's not going to take you anywhere that you don't expect. It's not going to have twists and turns. It's not going to play on that whole range of emotions. It's just going to be that one note. So I get what you guys are saying. And I think not for exactly the same reason, but I think I have to say no as well, even though I admire it for a whole bunch of reasons. I admire its minimal approach to game design. I admire the aesthetic. I admire a whole lot of things about it. And I think, if you are a student of games, then you should probably play it to learn from it. But otherwise, it's very niche, and whether or not you should play it depends on where you are in life as a person, which kind of, to me, seems to make it less universal than something like Journey or Passage or Tetris. So, that's my 2 cents.
It's a shame because it is a great game. It is a really fun, relaxing game, and anybody can play it. My mother-in-law has played through some of Flower. Like, it's a really interesting game, and it defies expectations of what video games typically are, and I think it's important in its role in the maturity of gaming as a platform. But I just think there are other games that absolutely people should definitely play that played a part in that maturation of the industry. And Flower's great, and if you are really interested in that, then yeah, play it. But otherwise, you don't have to play it. But it's a great game.
All right, so kind of a unanimous no, and yeah, it's not that I think it's a bad game, just because we say no for the most part on the show. In case this is the first episode you've ever listened to, doesn't mean we don't like the game. It just doesn't quite fit in with our personal echelon of what we, as individuals, consider best games. Period. That's why we all three speak our mind.
Correct.
Now, sometimes one of us will really just think a game sucks, but you usually get that impression well before the end of the show.
And we will back it up with why we think it's not great.
See, I still think Flower is a really hard game to talk about and define, and maybe that's why, maybe I just don't have the wherewithal or the wisdom or the words to be able to express that. But yeah, I think it's, if you want to play it, by all means, go for it. Lord knows it's not expensive. I think it's like, what, $7 maybe?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably around that.
Yeah, and, I think, like, if you had a young toddler, I think they'd enjoy picking up the control, and not that it can only be played by toddlers. No, I'm just going to shut up now.
Well, you're onto something. It's very...
Whitney has played.
Anyone can play it.
Yeah, it's accessible.
It's a really open game for children or old people who haven't played games, or anyone, really. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Jack?
Tell us all about Extra Life.
Yeah.
Well, Extra Life. It is coming up on November 5th, and what exactly is it? It's a video game marathon that supports sick and injured kids in hospitals, and it operates an awful lot like a Relay for Life or a charity marathon, except instead of running a marathon or walking around a track all night, you are getting pledges from friends, family, strangers to play video games for 24 hours straight. And, obviously 24 hours is a lot of time to dedicate to something. Not everyone can fit that into their schedules. Totally get it. But here's the cool thing. you can fit it into your own schedule however you want. If you want to break it up into separate days, or if you want to, even if you want to take it to the next level and you're like 24 hours, piece of cake, I'm going to do 48 hours. People can take it however far they want with it, or break it up however they feel is most convenient. The most important thing is just getting pledges and raising money for sick and injured kids. And you know what the really cool thing is? Everyone who signs up for Extra Life over at extra-life.org can choose which Children's Miracle Network hospital they want to support. And everything they raise, 100% of it goes directly to that hospital to pay for treatments for sick and injured kids. If you want to learn more or sign up, head over to extra-life.org. And it's really simple, really easy, really fast. You can also just donate to one of the many teams or participants that are playing for a hospital that you are in favor of. So, regardless, head over to extra-life.org to learn more, or to donate, or to sign up. And if you want to get more involved in the Extra Life community, you can head over to community.extra-life.org and get involved with the various guilds that are spread out throughout the country of people who are super dedicated to getting the most out of Extra Life and raising the most money and just chatting about random video game stuff or board game stuff online. It's really sweet. There are also awesome articles that, hey, guess what? I write. And you can also find this podcast over on community.extra-life.org. So check it out.
All right. I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
Almost here.
Joe and I are going to do a stream overnight, and he's got a massive Steam library that I plan on digging into to play some games that I've never played or would never spend money on.
Nice. I need to order some hot peppers.
Yes.
Yeah, you better get on that. Those might take longer to come in. Like, there might be a lot of people doing that this year.
I'm excited. A lot of interesting things are going to be going down on the Game Informer live stream this year. I'm not going to talk about them, but I can promise you it will be very interesting and entertaining. So that's where I'll be on November 5th. So you guys can tune in if you want to watch some shenanigans go down.
Jack.
Daniel.
Jeremy.
Jack.
Jeremy.
Daniel.
Jack and Jeremy.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you both for coming on the show tonight.
Well, you're welcome.
Thank you for flowering us with your flowery details about flour, deflowering our... Never mind.
Yeah. That almost blossomed into something terrible.
But thank you, good listeners, for putting up with us tonight. I promise I only had one beer tonight. I did not have any more than that. In case you were wondering, I'm just in a mood. I don't know how to explain it. If you like the show, we post it every Monday, and you can listen to more episodes. We have a whole archive of all 50 plus out on iTunes, as well as on Libsyn, our hosting site, as well as SoundCloud, not to be mistaken for Spotify. And we post the show every Monday on Game Informer and Extra Life at community.extra-life.org. And we also post it on our Twitter and on Facebook. And occasionally an episode goes up on our YouTube channel, The Best Games Period, on YouTube. And if you haven't reviewed us on iTunes and you're a fan and you enjoy listening to the show and you enjoy it and you want to spread the word and you want us to do more of it, if you have the time and are willing, we would love you forever if you gave us an iTunes review. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening. We will be on again next week to discuss another game, which, if you listen next week, you'll find out what that is. All right. Till next time. See you all on the flippity-dippity.
I thought you weren't going to say it. I thought you weren't going to say it for a split second.
You knew it was coming.
But I said it.